Okay, you filming? Okay. My camera woman today is Chieko, and today we're going to read the U.S. Electoral System Explained. The U.S. midterm, The U.S. midterm elections could see a shift in political control, but how does the U.S. system of government work? Here, BBC News Online explains the divisions of power, the elaborate electoral system, and how it ties in with the U.S. Constitution. Powers. The United States is a republic, which means that the people hold the power and they elect representatives to decide what to do with it. It is also a federal country, meaning that powers are divided between central government and those in the individual states. Although these powers have changed over time, the U.S. Constitution originally only gave certain powers to the federal government. Many government services are still the responsibility of state governments. Each state elects a governor and politicians to sit in the Senate, that's the upper house, and the House of Representatives, that's the lower house. The two chambers of the legislature. Federal power is divided into three separate branches of government. The president and his cabinet, this is called the executive branch. The two chambers of the U.S. Congress, this is the Senate and the House, and this is called the legislature, and they make the laws. And the courts, Judiciary, and we call this the Supreme Court. Elections. The United States holds elections every 2 years. Once every 4 years, there is a presidential election. And of course, this year we have the presidential election between Obama and McCain. With congressional elections held at the same time. Midterm elections take place between presidential elections in the middle of the presidential term. Elections for the House of Representatives are held every 2 years. Senators have 6-year terms, with 1/3 elected every 2 years. State governors serve 4-year terms, with about half up for election every 2 years. Primaries. Voters also get to choose their party's candidate in the main election. Voters register which party they support and can then participate in primary elections. Before he became the Republican candidate for president in 2000, George W. Bush had to beat Republican Senator John McCain in primary elections. Primaries are sometimes quite close to the general election, and once they are over, candidates must turn quickly to the general election. So both the Republican Party, which is McCain's party, and the Democratic Party, which is Obama's party, they both had their primary, what is this called? This is called the primary election, and this was just a few months ago. Constitution, the Kempo, right? America declared its independence from Britain in 1776. The Declaration of Independence read, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." 11 years later, the separate states joined together to form the United States. At Philadelphia in 1787, a convention attended by the most important men of the day produced a constitution. Unlike the UK, United Kingdom, England, the United States has a written constitution. It has four important principles: republicanism, federalism, the separation of powers, and checks and balances. President. The President's main function is to enforce the law by running the federal government. He also proposes laws and the annual budget to Congress, is Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. This means he's in charge of the Army. and is broadly responsible for foreign policy. He can also veto bills passed in the Congress, although that veto can be overridden if 2/3 of the Congress vote against it. This is what you were asking me before. If Congress passes the bill, but Bush or the president says no, that's called veto. He rejects the bill. But if 2/3, 66% of Congress says we want the bill, then it passes, even if Bush or the president says no. So if 2/3, 2/3 of the Congress, the upper house, Senate, and the lower house, the House of Representatives, if they pass the bill, then it becomes a law. The president is elected every 4 years, but cannot serve more than 2 terms. 1 term is 4 years. His cabinet members are not elected and are not normally members of Congress. They have to leave Congress to join the cabinet. Now the cabinet, the president's cabinet, or Bush's cabinet, are his group of advisors. Okay? Congress. The Congress is responsible for passing laws and the budget. Congress, it has 2 chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The 2 chambers share the power to declare war, while the Senate must approve treaties agreed to by the President. Senators must also approve the appointment of judges and many government officials. Every state, this is an important part, every state has 2 senators, but the number of members of the House depends on the population. Okay, so big states, states with a big population, with many, many people, they have more representatives. And states that have a few people, they have fewer representatives. Okay, so every state has 2 senators, but the number of the members of the House depends on the population. For example, a state like Wyoming, with a very small population, has 2 senators, but just 1 member of the House. While a state like California, with a huge population, still has 2 senators, but 43 members of the House. In total, there are 100 senators and 435 members of the House. Now, I'm not sure if this number is correct, because this was 8 years ago, or about 7 years ago. Judiciary. The third part, this is almost finished, the third part of government is the court system, known as the judiciary. This is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has 9 judges who decide whether laws are The Supreme Court has 9 judges who decide whether laws passed are in line with the Constitution. So, if Congress and the President make a law, but the Supreme Court says that's not a good law because it doesn't follow the Constitution, or it's against the Constitution, then the Supreme Court can reject that law. The judges are nominated by the President and have to be approved by the Senate. They are extremely powerful positions. The judges are appointed for life. So a vacancy can only arise through the death, resignation, retirement, or impeachment of a sitting judge. So only if a judge dies or quits or is fired can a new judge enter that position. And the President chooses the judge, and the Senate has to interview the judge. They ask him many questions. And they approve the judge or they reject the judge. 2-party system. Almost finished. 2-party system. The U.S. has a 2-party system, which makes it very hard for anyone who is not a Democrat or Republican to be elected. Almost everyone in Congress is a Democrat or a Republican. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me see.